Welcome to the Bob Woodruff Foundation's webinar, Straight Talk, Protecting Veterans from Scam and Fraud. I'm pleased to see so many people joining us today. I'm Dr. Meg Harrell. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Bob Woodruff Foundation. I welcome everyone joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from this panel. For those of you who may be less familiar with us, the Bob Woodruff Foundation's Got Your Six network is the largest non-governmental network of organizations serving our military and veteran community. Our network is made up of veterans serving organizations of varying size, maturity, and focus area. And I'm confident that the material that we'll be discussing today will be helpful to our partners who are on the ground, boots on the ground, serving veterans and communities across our country. So thank you to John Bursler for taking the time today to join us. John is the Chief Veterans Experience Officer with the Veterans Experience Office of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Prior to this, he was the CEO of the Houston-based Collaborative Combined Arms, and John served in the Marine Corps. So thanks, John, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Meg. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. So for those of you who have joined us, I encourage you to type questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We're going to have time at the end of our conversation to address questions. So let's jump right into this. John, can you level set us first? What's the difference between frauds and scams that we should know?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Megan. I think that's I think they one leads into the other, of course. I think that's an important distinction as we're thinking about predatory organizations in general and what types of tactics or strategies are they employing to defraud or scam a veteran. So fraud really involves like any sort of unauthorized access to someone's personal information without that individual's knowledge or consent. And scams are attempts or campaigns or tactics used or designed to kind of, trick victims into willingly providing their sensitive information so they can access, different information, or so they can access different benefits or funds or information that may be used to hurt them in some way. So we at VA, really want to make sure that our customers are more aware of all the different types of fraud attempts, the predatory organizations and scams that may be impacting them as a means of increasing consumer protection for our veterans, families, caregivers, and survivors.
We teased the audience with some of those different types in the poll that they saw. Can you talk us through some of those? Like if we say imposter scams, what is that?
Yeah, that's someone pretending to be a government official. So someone calling saying that they're from VA, for example, and then that they can help you with your healthcare, your benefits for a fee or for accessing your personal information. And then they'll redirect your disability benefits compensation or your base allowance for housing for your education benefits. There's all kinds, or your pension. So there's all kinds of different ways that they can do that. So that imposter fraud is a very common occurrence, whether it's in the form of like a romance scheme, which targets many different types of veterans, but especially older veterans, especially for some people calling or emailing or texting veterans pretending to be someone they're not.
What about categories like healthcare and finance and housing? How do those frauds differ from one another?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I mean, and it's so complex because, for healthcare, you can have like billing fraud where, somebody is illegally or unethically billing VA for services or equipment that were never provided, or billing the veterans and their families directly for services that VA provided, and they're trying to trick them into sharing information, sensitive information, or pay that entity. And of course, those are criminal offenses, so that you can report those to the Department of Justice. You can report that to the FBI or the VA Office of Inspector General, which they have enforcement authorities as well. And of course, we'll share a lot of this information on the back end so that everyone knows exactly how to report that information. Housing fraud, it's really where in a couple of different instances, and we see this a lot in natural disasters where folks pretending to like a mixture of imposter fraud. So folks pretending to be FEMA coming in and offering disaster assistance, or somebody coming in to offer refinance, capabilities to somebody who had just lost a part of their estate in a natural disaster. And there's those are also criminal acts that can be reported. And then when we think about like home loans, and how that works, and especially for the VA loan guarantee program, which is a fantastic program, that's really kind of, where we look at like what they call loan churning or loan flipping, is where they may, kind of try to skim equity from folks, or try to fraudulently appraise their property, or help kind of falsify the loan qualifications. So there's all kinds of different ways and attempts and strategies and tactics that folks are using out there. But we're constantly learning about those new strategies and tactics, mainly from our customers and our local partners, like the community veteran engagement boards, and the local partners that you all work with too.
You've seen a lot of fraud come after the signing of the PACT Act, haven't you?
Indeed, yeah. Who hasn't seen a commercial about Camp Lejeune? And if you served before 1988, for example, in Camp Lejeune in the water, so there's, it's very confusing because there's a DoD portion of that system of benefit, and then there's a VA portion of obviously being exposed to toxins in the waters, and then you can apply for VA benefits for that. And so we set up a website called camplejeune.va.gov, and that kind of lays out the differences between, the DoD, what the DoD is responsible for, what VA is responsible for. And oh, by the way, be on the lookout for these types of predatory organizations and claim sharks that want to help you file your VA claim, which you can file your VA claim for free with VA directly, or an accredited veteran service organization, or an accredited representative, which can be found on the va.gov VSAFE website. So we see that a lot. So claim sharks has been a big focus of ours. And recently, Secretary McDonough put out a public service announcement about claim sharks, and we'd love to share that as a product that your local partners can share to their veterans and families.
Sure. And when we're done here, we're going to talk about a number of really valuable resources. So we will make sure that people who are viewing this webinar, we'll do a follow-up email. We'll send links to these resources that we've mentioned here today. John, you mentioned the PACT Act commercials. So if we see a commercial for a lawyer advertising help with, Camp Lejeune benefits, for example, do we automatically assume that's a fraud?
Well, it's, some of these firms are accredited. So you can always go online to va.gov VSAFE, and at the top, you'll be able to find out if that firm is an accredited representative of the Department of Veterans Affairs. You can also look up in a number of other different resources that we'll share in our fraud prevention toolkit. And then if they're not, you can report that information to the organizations and federal agencies that cover down on that level, on that vertical of enforcement. So there's a couple different ways to make sure that you're connecting with the right folks, but always remember, you don't have to pay to file a claim. You can file it directly with VA. You can file it directly with an accredited veteran service organization. A State Department of Veterans Affairs have many claims representatives. County veteran service officers have many accredited representatives. And then there are some other accredited representatives that are listed on our website.
You mentioned a couple times as we were talking about different types of frauds, the term criminal. So you and I have spoken about this. Unfortunately, my understanding is not all the frauds and scams that we're going to talk about today are criminal. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Some are technically not illegal, but we would refer to them as unethical, or as Dr. Porter, my colleague in the VSAFE organization, or the VSAFE task force, would refer to as predatory, preying on veterans and their families, and taking advantage of them for access to their benefits, or access to their sensitive information, or access to some of their financials, their finances that they've worked so hard to benefit their families. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make veterans and their families more aware of these attempts, and most importantly, how they can report that information so we can take action.
Yeah. And we'll come back to some of the other types of frauds if we don't, run into them in our conversation anyway. But I want to jump to VSAFE because you just mentioned that. Can you talk a little bit more about what VSAFE is and what people should know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So VSAFE, or which is a great acronym for as VA always uses great acronyms. It stands for Veteran Scam and Fraud Evasion, and initially started as just a task force within VA to ensure that the Veterans Benefits Administration, the National Cemetery Administration, the Board of Veterans Appeals, and the Veterans Health Administration were working more collaboratively, we're coordinating more effectively, and then speaking with one voice to our large customer base of veterans and their families, so that they understand who to go to and how to report these instances of fraud and scam attempts. That it also helped us, like I said, trend and analyze the different attempts that veterans are reporting to us and to our federal partners. The second component is just that, the Federal Partner Task Force, which President Biden announced on Veterans Day, is this broad-based, very tight, very inclusive network of federal agencies, ranging from the Department of Justice to the Department of Defense, to the Federal Trade Commission, the CFPB, so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, VA, and many others, to ensure that we are working collectively, collaboratively to combat more of these scam and fraud attempts, and to increase the level of awareness and consumer protection for veterans and their families and active military as well. And so that's gone incredibly well, because VA doesn't have certain enforcement authorities, but we have the biggest, bully pulpit. We have the biggest megaphone to speak and connect with our customers and connect with our partners, which is what today is all about, to help us get the word out to more veterans. That's our role here, is to connect everyone, coordinate, and then get the word out to our vets and families.
So you're getting the word out, and then what's the benefit of having the interdepartmental or interagency effort?
Well, they're the ones who
The
take the
enforcement?
action. Exactly. Yeah. They're the ones who take action on behalf of the consumers, on behalf of veterans and their families, and hold these organizations, these predatory organizations, accountable for what they're doing. And so that's the key piece there, and making sure. So we need to make sure that we're distilling the information down so that it's understandable and consumable for veterans and their families on how to identify and how to report that information. So if you go to va.gov/vsafe, which is our new kind of all-in-one website that we're always making additions to, you can find, one pager sets of collateral that's in both English, Spanish, and Tagalog, as well as our federal toolkit, which details exactly what each agency covers down on, and and how to report to them.
Yeah, the toolkit's fantastic, and I'm going to raise some of the things that are in the toolkit in a couple minutes. But one, you're not just getting the word out; you're also listening, right? You're traveling around and
We
hearing
are.
from veterans. What are some of the things
Yes.
that you're learning from those sessions?
Yeah, and no, thank you. And I think this is one of those opportunities to make sure we're learning from your local partners and your community veteran engagement organizations and boards, so that we can better arm our veterans with that information. We've done so this is the third of approximately 10 that we'll do in the next couple of financial quarters. So they range from different listening sessions at universities and colleges, to get a better understanding of the type of predatory schools that are promoting their degree programs to veterans, but aren't accredited with VA or charging way too much for that tuition. We're also doing women veteran specific community support forums. We're doing minority veteran specific community support forums. We're doing partnerships with FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and specifically about LGBTQ plus veterans and their families, and how they are being targeted by certain predatory organizations. So we're really trying to think of not just geographically, what are the types of trends and different fraud and scam attempts, but also based on what type of customer persona or what type of veteran and family members we're serving. how might we better learn from them on how these trends are emerging and how do we better protect their brothers and sisters moving forward.
Well, let's talk about some of those differences. So, are older veterans a more common victim of scam and fraud, or are they just a different type of victim of scam and fraud?
I think just a different type of victim of scam and fraud. And of course, there are just in terms of population, there are, of course, more older veterans now than there are younger veterans, just because of the size of the Vietnam era generation in particular.
Mhm.
So that makes them particularly susceptible because there are so many more veterans. But I would say they're older veterans and younger veterans are just two of the personas. If we think about how these organizations, these predatory organizations, are attempting to defraud or to scam their veterans and their families. And in particular, we see a lot of, especially because of PACT Act, a lot of different claim sharks marketing to both personas, both older veterans and younger veterans, and everyone in between that I mentioned in the listening sessions. But we do see a lot of romance schemes. We see a lot of imposter schemes and identity theft schemes and scams directed toward older veterans, whereas many of the predatory schools that are kind of angling toward the younger veterans.
What do the romance schemes look like? And, how can we protect ourselves and our loved ones from being a victim of a romance scam?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways that you can and romance scams could also be kind of referred to as imposter scams too. I mean, because it's someone that's pretending to be someone they're not. They're pretending to be interested in this individual, but they're really not, because they're trying to get access to their money or their personal information. So there's some really great resources that are once again on va.gov/VSAFE, but I would say some of the recommendations on like kind of what to do and not to do is to make sure and review anything. If you get a document sent to you by somebody that's trying to trying to scam you, make sure you review everything and don't sign anything. Don't always keep a record of anything. If you do work with an accredited veteran service organization, but just make sure that you're doing everything you can to arm yourselves and arm your family members with this information, and then report that interaction as soon as you can to the resources that we provide.
Okay. If I'm an individual and I've already been scammed and the damage is done, what's the importance of me reporting it?
So we know that based on the data that we've seen, there's only so many reports that have actually been made in the last few years between the active military, reserve and guard military components, and then the veteran population. And that's I think it's so important that those reports happen, because we're able to learn exactly what types of strategies and tactics these predatory organizations are using to try and defraud veterans and to try and scam veterans, so that we could increase the levels of awareness and increase overall consumer protection. So if you don't report it, then we won't be able to understand exactly how they're trying to present themselves to veterans in the future, and we're not able to help you, especially if someone accesses your finances or accesses sensitive information or steals your identity. The government won't be able to help you if you don't report it, or law enforcement won't be able to follow up if it's a criminal act. So the resources provided in the federal toolkit, the one-stop shop of the va.gov VSAFE website, that kind of details exactly how veterans and their families should report these instances of scam and fraud attempts.
Okay. And what about from the perspective of a veteran serving organization? If they're working with a veteran that they suspect is a victim of fraud or scam, is there something that the organization can do, or do they need to just encourage the veteran to report it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the best resource for that is, particularly if it involves VA and accredited representatives and claims, they can call the National Contact Center, which is our benefits hotline, and report that information. They can also reach out to the VA's Inspector General, Office of Inspector General, especially if it's something that criminal that is directed toward VA or one of our customers. There are also a host of other federal resources, but I would start there because that's really important for us to be able to follow up and to help these individuals and ensure that they get to where they need to go.
In some of the VA materials, you talk about fraud that doesn't really seem to victimize the veteran, but uses the veteran, like the veteran's image is on other websites, or that somebody is, the veteran receives, explanations of benefit that say they got all sorts of medical tests that they didn't actually get. So somebody else is profiting from that. Can you say a little bit more about that? Should that veteran feel victimized?
Yeah, I think anyone who's not, who doesn't have your consent to use your likeness or to use your personal information, you should report. I think we'd have to find out which agency specifically would cover down on the enforcement for such an action, but absolutely. I mean, the whole definition back to the beginning of the webinar. It's really accessing one's finances or information without their consent, or almost like tricking them, right? So I think that the federal toolkit, the federal partner toolkit, that's a great place to start to be able to help identify and where to report.
The toolkit, I really appreciate it. It starts almost at the very beginning with, signs that something might be a scam. And can you say more about what these would look like? Like, what does it look like when somebody pretends to be someone or some organization that you know? How do they do that?
We've seen a lot of attempts of these predatory organizations using similar branding that VA actually uses, and attempt that sends individuals a text message or an email and pretending to be VA and trying to access their personal information, or trying to get them to call them and provide their personal information or access their finances. These organizations will ask for money transfers. So don't send money. So never send money. As another kind of tip, and then report that report that interaction as quickly as you can. Make sure if you're logging into a website. So if you receive one of these impersonator types of text messages or emails, make sure that it has multi-factor identification on it, because VA websites only use logins, whether that's login.gov or myhealthyvet or id.me or dslogon, that there's always a multi-factor identification process. So make sure that if you feel like it's like a predatory, it probably is. So there's also, we've seen attempts by organizations offering IT support to individuals, and so be careful of those as well. Coming in and, hey, if you give me your login, I'll help you access, or I'll help you with your computer, and I can show you exactly. So be careful of that information as well. So, or those attempts as well.
I also saw some of them come in and say there's a problem, a family emergency or something.
Right. Yeah, just pretending to be a loved one in general is one that we see quite a lot. And impersonating, whether or not they're impersonating a government agency or a loved one. That's what we see, whether that's on the phone, that's on text message, that's email, that's mail, via post mail as well. So just be careful and always be cautious and report that information if it seems out of place.
Or you've won a prize.
Yeah, you've click here for access, the ability to win $1,000 gift certificate or something like that. Like, never click on those phishing emails, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there's even folks that, watch out for this extreme emergency and all these types of scam attempts. So if it seems off, it probably is, and then go to our federal partner toolkit and find out exactly where to report them.
Great. And some of the guidance from the toolkit are things like that you've said, don't provide your personal info, don't use cryptocurrency, don't act immediately. Can you say more about these?
Yeah, I mean, so here I'll just kind of read off some of the top 10 things to know, and this is I think this is one of the ones that are specific about pension poaching or identity theft or claim sharks in particular, and PACT Act, because it impacts so many different generations of Vietnam veterans, Gulf War veterans, post 9/11 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. We've seen just a dramatic increase in to your point earlier, Meg. And so number one is like file your benefit claims with VA directly or with an accredited representative. I know I've said that a couple of times already, but that's just you never have to pay to file your claim. Be cautious of different media ads from companies that say veterans can only obtain PACT Act benefits with their help. I mean, there's a lot of those attempts right now, as we've seen on commercials, as we've seen in different mail and text message campaigns and social media campaigns as well. Never sign a contract to pay an unauthorized company to help with your claim. There's, like I said, go to va.gov/VSAFE. At the top of the website, you'll be able to view all the accredited veteran service organizations and accredited representatives, so that you can verify that they're a partner with VA. We're also getting just as a dovetail of that, we're also working with the Veterans Benefits Administration to potentially post a public link to all the organizations that aren't working with VA that we've sent cease and desist letters to. So more coming soon. And you never have to pay to submit a new claim. VA does not charge processing fees. So if you ever see that type of language in there, be suspicious and report it. Review all the documents thoroughly. Never sign a blank form for someone else to complete. Never do that, and always keep a record of completed forms that you've submitted or you need to submit with VA. So those are some of the kind of quick tips on PACT Act specifically, and as it relates to claims and pension and other programs that we offer.
Yeah, those are really helpful to everybody. Those are in the toolkit, which again is fantastic. John, you mentioned different personas, and we talked a little bit about younger veterans, older veterans, but you said those aren't the only ones. What other sorts of populations are you specifically looking at? Is rural veterans one, for example?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Rural veterans in what we call like unique geographies, or like the freely associated states or the American territories, or Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, Alaska. I mean, folks that are really far away from VA facilities, in addition to the highly rural areas of the continental United States are two of our populations. I mentioned women veterans and doing specific listening sessions with them, LGBTQ plus veterans, and specific sessions set up with FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. We're focused on elderly veterans. We just completed a listening session with some of our partners, our VSO partners, earlier this week, to really glean some of the insights from elderly veterans, 60 years old and up, to make sure that we're understanding, some of those attempts, and so we can defend against that. Homeless veterans, that's another persona that we want to make sure and include in that persona understanding, knowing that they could be specifically targeted for different types of scam or frauds. Folks with mental health needs. So we haven't talked about fiduciary fraud, but if you have an assigned fiduciary or someone with a power of attorney for your affairs, because you're incapacitated in some way, there's a lot of fraud that happens there, to take advantage of those individuals and to not help them meet their needs, and using those finances or the access to information for personal benefit. And then, of course, I mentioned disaster survivors. that's such a a unique pain point for predatory or opportunity for predatory organizations to come in and use a mixture of imposter fraud and housing fraud and food, like folks that are offering to provide food assistance, et cetera. And then student veterans, education, and those predatory organizations that are specifically targeting student veterans and their families that aren't accredited with VA, that we want to make them aware of.
You mentioned homeless veterans. They have so little. What are they being scammed out of?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of homeless veterans are receiving VA pension, right? Non-service connected pension. So this could be a redirect of their direct deposit. This could be, using a lot of the other tactics, like, making sure that they're, or by, assuming their identity and going in and stealing what few funds they do have. So you would be surprised of what we've seen, as well as in cemeteries. We've seen the National Cemetery Administration, we've seen different types of fraud and scam attempts, and then they've stood up their own team within the National Cemetery Administration to ensure that more veterans are aware of the predatory, funeral homes and funeral service companies that are trying to pose as accredited organizations, or even pose as VA themselves, to take advantage of these individuals.
That's interesting because, as much as you educate the veterans, it's the bereaved family members that are left behind when a veteran dies. And you're saying they're being targeted specifically?
Yeah, we got there was some flyers that we had been sent from cemetery leaders in the field, that were, once again, not illegal activities, but unethical or predatory in nature, because they weren't accredited, they weren't working with VA, they were trying to, to take advantage of veterans and their families and access their finances. So there's a lot of examples out there, and that's how we get this information, is our employees in the field, our partners, our veteran service organization partners, our local partners that you all work with, our community veteran engagement boards, and then customers themselves. I mean, if you don't report it to us, if you don't let us know, then we can't help those in the future, and they can't help you recoup those funds, or make sure that you're taken care of.
Yeah, it's really sad. We've heard a little bit about victims being embarrassed that they were victimized. Are you seeing that people are actually resistant or reluctant to report?
Oh yeah,
Are you running into
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, I mean, people could feel embarrassed or ashamed, to your point, Meg, of reporting that, like they feel like they were duped, like someone got them, kind of thing. And these folks, these predatory actors, I mean, they're skilled, they know what they're doing, and they get the best of a lot of us, right? So, people, I think Dr. Porter, we were talking earlier, is like, even if you're the smartest person in the room or the smartest person in the world, you can still experience these types of scam and fraud attempts. So that's why, we're trying to make it so much easier for folks to report it and to normalize the activity, so that we can detect it more frequently, but then also report it. So now, if we have a baseline of about, what I think it was like 174 to 200 million reported in fraud last year from veterans, just veterans alone, not the active military. That was just what was reported. We know that it could be much, much higher than that. So a metric that we want to see increase over time is not only is the number of reports, because of this outbound outreach campaign, and then hopefully we'll see the dollars taken from veterans decrease over time, as we see, the number of reports increase. So that's our message here, is just, like, find the information on va.gov/VSAFE, and then reach out and report that predatory action.
Those numbers are astonishing and really dismaying. So, John, we've had some really interesting questions come in, and I think I'm going to turn to those. But before we
Great.
do, viewers, please, if you would, I've got another two-question poll for you that's going to pop up, and then we'll jump into the questions that have been submitted. Okay, we have a question about whether they can share the toolkit. And John, I think I know the answer to that. Absolutely share the toolkit. In fact, I've encouraged people to share it even with non-veterans, because so much of it, some of it is specific to VA benefits and frauds and scams related to that, but a lot of that is just, human frailty, fraud, and scam. So,
Yeah, Meg, I always say that veterans are we're humans too, as regular Americans and regular humans. Not so much us Marines, right? But everyone else. I mean, we so absolutely, it does apply very broadly in a lot of the resources we provide. So please share it. Thank you.
Please share it. If veterans have been victimized, where can they receive free or discounted help to recover from that?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. Obviously, with VA, I would recommend calling the national if you're some sort of benefits fraud or identity theft or direct deposit redirect, or fiduciary fraud from a power of attorney caregiver, or someone who has the authority to act on your behalf. Let us know at the National Contact Center, and then I would also, direct you to, once again, the federal partner toolkit. So you're reporting that action to either the Federal Trade Commission or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they'll be able to help you not only, bring that action to justice if it's warranted and an enforcement action, but potentially help you recover your benefits if that's allowable under the circumstance.
Thank you. Hey, we have several questions about rural veterans. Are they targeted the same way? What are the specific challenges they encounter? And what's in motion to help them?
Yeah, and I know that a lot of rural veterans are experiencing billing fraud, particularly in the community care network, because they're accessing, in many cases, private sector providers who may be closer than some VA facilities. So we've seen evidence of that. We see a lot of mail fraud, post mail fraud, in rural veterans, and then of course just the other types of phone scams, phishing attempts and on websites, and then email scams as well. So we definitely want to pay attention to rural veterans and their needs because of that, and that's why that's a persona that we're actively pursuing in terms of like listening sessions, in terms of outbound outreach. We've seen a lot of success reaching rural veterans in particular throughout the PACT Act, using radio PSAs, radio public service announcements. And there's actually a website, and Hunter, I'm not sure if you're able to share it in the chat as well. There's a really great website that talks about some of the strategies and tactics these organizations use in a specific radio PSA that you can use in if you're a local partner or a community veteran engagement board in a rural area. You can use that PSA with your local radio organizations and networks, which I'm sure you may be connected with, and then ask them to air it for free. So there's a great website resource for all VA PSAs that are shareable with our partners.
We'll absolutely share that. And we'll be sending an email out to those who registered for this webinar, and it'll have more resources on it. For those of you who wonder, Hunter Russ is the amazing wizard behind the curtain that is making all the technology run for this webinar. A couple questions about home repairs and fraud, and this strikes near and dear as I'm in the midst of a home remodel myself. Contractors that take the money and then don't do the work. Are there resources for veterans to help with those sorts of repair scams?
Yeah, that's certainly an FTC reporting channel, for sure. And like for contractors who don't do their the work that they're contracted to do. That type of fraud is especially something that we want to report. And then always check that they, when you sign a contract, make sure that the organization or the company has a license to operate. So I see that Hunter just put the radio outreach. I put it in there as well, if that's, but I think I only sent it to the hosts and panelists. So oops. So thank you, Hunter, for relaying that. And that's where you can find all those PSAs. But yeah, that's a big issue that we see on the housing side of some of these fraud attempts too.
Yeah. Laura Elton says that she has 2 veterans that got caught up in the Nigerian scams and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are there strategies to help them once those funds are gone, or is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, I would once again report that. That's a phishing scam. That's usually sent to people via email or sometimes via text message, and just never send money if it's not connected, to, or just never send money if you don't know who you're sending money to, right? I mean, if you have no idea who that individual is, I think we've all been victims of those types of phishing attempts by the princes or the royalty or whomever that person may be, or not in most cases. So I would once again say, this is reportable to the FTC, or certainly now there's probably FBI investigations about these types of predators, because they've been impacting the civilian population and the veteran population for so long.
Yeah. John, what have I not asked that people really need to know?
Ooh, wow. I think we've talked about quite a bit. I would, once again, kind of push the products that we have on our va.gov/VSAFE website, and which is meant to be kind of that one-stop shop, that centralized hub for information, not just within VA, but more importantly, with our federal partners. States have a big role to play as well here, and may have jurisdiction if your attorney general in your state may have jurisdiction over certain fraud attempts or scams. So we want to get smarter on that and incorporate that information. So my call to action for all our partners is not only share this information as broadly as you can with our joint customers, veterans and their families, but also send us feedback. Tell us what you're seeing in the field, whether you're experiencing it individually or you represent or work with veterans and families that experience it. These tactics are bound to change like every day, right? And they're getting more sophisticated, they're changing and adapting, and we need to continue to learn about that. And we're building a more permanent fixture within VA to monitor, track, and analyze and trend this information, so that we can better prepare our customers and once again see that reporting number go up and the fraud amounts go down, hopefully.
So I think we've successfully sold the toolkit very well, and by the way, it deserves to be sold. It's fantastic. So we'll make sure that gets out, and I'll just underscore your point. Get the word out. Hopefully we can prevent these frauds and scams. But if you encounter a veteran too late, do everything you can to encourage them to report, so that John and the others in the government working on this can learn and work on prevention. So thank you, John, for joining us, and thank you everyone that attended today to understand more about scams and frauds. It's so important that we do everything we can to learn and disarm those that are trying to victimize us and our veterans. We will be sending out an email with a link to the recording for any of your colleagues or friends that missed it. And we hope that everybody benefits from this. Again, John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Meg. And it's great to see you and your amazing teammates. And just want to do a huge shout out to Dr. Catherine Porter and Andy Martinez and Dr. Porter's amazing team, as well as our VBA, VHA, NCA, and other federal partners. it's been a lot of work over the last year and a half, and we're doing it on behalf of our partners and our veterans, most importantly. So hold us, keep us updated, hold us accountable, and we'll continue to share as much as we can.
Well, you've been doing a great job. Thanks, John, to you and to your amazing team. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon, John, and everyone that joined us.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.